Right. I'm mic'd up. There we go. This is weird. 3,000 subscribers in a matter of, what's that, 5 months? Something like that. I mean, I started, right, I need to film a proper intro. This video is going to be a Q&A for my 3,000 subscriber special. I'm quite proud saying that. To say I'm at 3,000 subscribers after, you know, if we're playing the long part, I started making videos in September 2024 and now we're here in, you know, just the start of July 2025 and I've hit 3,000 subscribers. Wow. There was a big gap between my first 2 videos and the consistent videos that I've been making, and recently, like the past 2 months, I've kind of had life stuff going on and I've had to break up what I've been doing and manage my schedule and, you know, a whole load of stuff. And I'm in 70D now. This is the camera I take photos on, you know, it's not meant for outdoor content and stuff like that, but my first 2 videos were filmed on this, and then I very kindly convinced the missus if I could get one of these, which wasn't cheap, but it has made this whole thing possible. All I do want to say before I get into the questions is thank you, every one of you, for subscribing and watching the videos, and those of you who are showing support and liking and dropping comments and stuff. It's hard to comprehend, and I knew I would hit 3,000 subscribers at some point. I knew it would come. I just didn't know it would be this soon, because I can remember only a couple of months ago I was so focused on actually hitting the 1,000 mark and getting monetized on YouTube, and that's in the dust now, and I've 3 times that, and most of it came from the beginner's guide video that I did, which currently at this moment is nearly at 93,000 views, which that is mental. Anyways, let's get into the questions. First question is from Primary the Cat. Said, I know you've touched on these things briefly in your past videos, but personally I think it would be nice to hear about YouTube channels you watch for inspiration or even to relax. The history of you and your missus, general life in Scotland, the scariest wild camping mission you've been on, techniques you use to stay calm and collected when on the hikes. I hope this gives you some more inspiration. I love this channel and I'm happy to be here to watch it grow. Best wishes, Adam, you're a legend, mate. Thanks, Primary the Cat. Starting off with the channels I watch for inspiration or just to relax, the biggest inspiration, hands down, is definitely the Outdoor Boys YouTube channel. If you know who they are, you know why. I've also found though that Madison Clydesdale, she's a Canadian outdoor YouTuber, she really makes some brilliant videos. I've seen less of her content. I still think the stuff that she makes, even though I don't watch it as often, is brilliant. However, if I was to go for more like UK based ones that I've seen, I think Liam Brown and the T8 Outdoor YouTube channel, they are brilliant. I've watched bits and pieces of their channel and again, I've taken a lot of inspiration from those guys and they're just fun to watch and learn, you know. Aside from those guys though, I seem to go through phases of what I enjoy watching, and that often does not involve outdoor content. Like right now, I'm quite thoroughly enjoying Penguin Zero's videos. He's more of a commentary style YouTuber that does drama and funny videos. It's just him sitting in a room talking at a camera. Moving even further away from outdoor content though, I've really quite enjoyed CoffeeZilla's videos. If you're not familiar with him, he does like crypto scams and stuff. Like he doesn't do the scams, he finds people who are doing like crypto scams and scams online and stuff like that, and he reveals what they've been doing. I just think the stuff that he does is really entertaining. Even though I don't understand half of it, I still find it fun to watch. I've occasionally enjoyed the odd like car modding video from Shaq's WD. All of the channels, by the way, that I've mentioned will be in the description. Shaq's essentially does like car modding and car cleaning videos, and those are the ones I enjoy. The foam spraying on the whole car and the way it's wiped off, I just love it. That's like, it's really satisfying to watch. Again, not related to like camping stuff at all, but that's just what I enjoy watching. I also need to briefly mention, you know, Minecraft and all that sort of stuff. I love that. But as for the history of me and my missus, we've been together for about 3 years, and every step of the way she's been a massive pillar of support for me, both in my hobbies and what I'm pursuing, and encouraging me to do that. Just in general, she's shown me a lightness to life, and I don't want to get too serious, but she's always been there for me through thick and thin over the past 3 years. And it's weird because it feels like, we were talking about this earlier, it feels like we don't know each other, but we have the same brain. And I think to share that with another person is a gift, to say the least. I think without her, I can't say I'm confident I would be where I am today. As for the general life in Scotland, it's alright. Scotland's a mixed bag. There's rough bits, but I think the scenery is unmatched, and I've yet to see the majority of it. It's just a beautiful place when you go to the right places. I think that's something I've not seen a majority of, and that'll be something that we explore on this channel, and through time and as the years go on, I'll see more and more places and take you guys with me. Also when I get a car. Another good element of this question, I thought, was the part about when I'm out on the hikes, what techniques do I use to stay calm? That's a great question, because it can be really overwhelming when you're out in the middle of nowhere alone, getting battered by the rain, you're getting battered by the wind, you are cold. It can be a very overwhelming thing, I think, to be in the outdoors and you've not got many kind of familiar things nearby. And I think for me, music is the main thing that I use. Music's something that I can kind of take anywhere with me, and it's something that I can find comfort in. Not all the time, but I think a majority of the time when I feel I need that, it's there. It's on my phone, you know, it's always with me, and I find that really useful. And I think it makes a big difference for me to have something familiar with me in places that are just completely unfamiliar, you know. I also actively take photos while I'm out. A big part of what I do is photography, and that's what I enjoy. And if you're not already familiar with that, then you can hop over to my website. That'll be in the description. That's a kind of different thing from doing outdoor and survival stuff, because it's a huge creative outlet for me. You'll have seen me in some of my past videos taking photos on film, and I've not posted the final results, and I have toyed with the idea of doing more photography in the videos because I enjoy it. But I think it would maybe be a nice idea if I put the photography in the videos and actually put the final images in the video, so you're seeing what I'm shooting and then the final images are coming up as I'm doing it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I think it'd be a good idea, and I think I'd quite enjoy it. So if you're interested in any of my photos and photography stuff, I have actually made videos on another YouTube channel that, again, I'll link in the description, that I do want to make more on. I want to make more videos that involve photography and explore that, and it is something that I'm really privy to doing. So if you want to see that, I'll put the channel in the description as well. I haven't posted on there in a long time, but I'll also pop my Instagram in the description down below as well, because I post every now and again on there. So I enjoy photography because it's not just photos for me, it's a creative outlet, it's art. And I think, very much like Lauren, it's always been there for me. It's through thick and thin, it's been there, and it's been something that I've been able to turn to through hardship and difficulty. I hope that answers your question, Primary the cat, you know. Next question. Shax WD said, and this was also said in the last question, was, what's your scariest moment when camping alone? This is a good one because I've had a few moments. The main one though was an attempted wild camp that I did at Loch Ard, the exact same location that you've seen me and my missus bike pack to in one of the previous videos. I'll link that down in the description as well. I hiked there with about 12 kilo of kit on my back, and it took me about 3 hours from the location that I was walking from. It was November, so it was getting dark around 4:30, and by the time I got to camp, the light was pretty much faded. but there was also kind of overcast clouds that just completely wiped out the ambient light at night from like the stars and the moon and stuff. Also the fact that I was in the Loch Ard forest, you know, the trees that tower over you, they just take away loads and loads of light. And let me also add, there was no service within about 2.5 miles or 3.5 kilometres, and I had just hiked about 5 kilometres. I remember having this horrible feeling creeping up on me as the light was fading. It was like a dread, like a guttural anxiety, and I just tried to look past it and set up camp and focus on getting the tent and stuff ready for when it was dark so I could have a bit of comfort. And I tried to lay down in the tent in my sleeping bag and just kind of wait it out. And it was just this gradual like chest tightening feeling I had of anxiety. And I remember also the thing that made that worse is I felt like I was hearing like noises outside the tent, sticks cracking and like the occasional dampened thump. It was like distant. Looking back, I think it was just things falling out of the trees and, you know, my heightened anxiety made it worse. But I got back out of the tent and I didn't have a headlamp at that point. I only had my bike torch, and I got out and I looked around and it felt as though the trees were staring back at me when I was looking at them. And I just had this feeling of like, I'm getting it now as I'm talking about it. Wow, like the hairs stood up on the back of my neck and these like full body goosebumps. I'm only getting them in my neck right now, but it was the full, I kid you not, from my toes all the way up to my head was this like goosebump feeling. And right then and there I was like, I am packing up, I'm going. I was not for staying there at all. I remember looking around when I was taking my tent down though, and I felt like a sitting duck. Because let me remind you, I had no service and I was about 5 kilometres or 3 miles from the nearest town. And I realised this feeling that I've got of like, I am alone, but I might not be. I don't think I am. Like it was this uncertainty. It kind of hit me and I realised if anything bad happened, I would be in a really, really bad spot. And, you know, including the fact I don't have a satellite communicator, I'm relying on my phone at this point, and I still am. So amidst all of that, while I was packing up my tent and my stuff, I remember just ramming it in my bag. I made the decision not to hike back but run, and I remember setting my watch to like the sports mode for running so I could at least track the distance so I knew roughly where I was, because you can't see anything. You know, the amount of light that I had was all in my bike torch, and it is a powerful torch, don't get me wrong, but when you are miles, and I'm getting those goosebumps again, look at that, look, no it's not focusing, come on. I just had a wave of those goosebumps. I cannot stress that point, that the amount of light I had was in the bike torch, and it's strong, but when all you're seeing is a little spotlight in miles of woodland and just emptiness, it is a very, very dreadful feeling. I remember at one point I turned my torch off and I realised that I couldn't see my feet on the ground, and it was when I looked in front of me, it was just black. And I specifically remember doing this with my hand and I could not see my hand. And you know, I think I would have been okay not having that amount of light, like having the torch off and stuff, if the clouds weren't there, but they were coating the stars and the trees that were around me were just taking all of that light away, and you just could not see anything. And it was kind of then that I realised, and that was only about 5 minutes into the run, not long at all. I kind of realised I am solely relying on this torch to get me out here, on my phone torch, and I was kind of navigating the trail off of instinct, to be honest. And I remember I ran the trail, I've got it on my phone, I'll put the app up on screen. I ran the length of that loch in 35 minutes. It was the most horrible run I have ever done in my life. It was just anxiety and like fear. I've never felt that adrenaline before, and you know, nothing had happened. There was no like big event that caused that. It was just purely my own thoughts in my mind caused that, and it was difficult to say the least. But the interesting part is I was actually filming that because that was going to be a video that I put up, and I feel like that whole experience could be a video in its own. You know, it could be its very own video, and if you do want to see that, let me know in the comments. My lights have just turned off. I hope that answers the question. That's been hands down the scariest moment. There we go, I've got my lights back on. Mary Ann here popped in a few questions. Why is that turned off? I think my lights over here have ran out of battery. How unprofessional is that? She said, I know that you prefer to use alcohol-based fuel for starting fires. However, what would be your favourite tree to rely on for firewood, hypothetically, if your fuel had depleted in some? That is a tricky question, because ideally, I don't want to be burning any deadwood, and I've done that before, but I'm completely against it. You know, after I fully looked into the Scottish Outdoor Access Codes and realised the effect it does actually have on the environment, particularly in Scotland. Hypothetically, if we're saying I'm in some sort of survival situation and I have to use wood, I don't think there's a particular tree I would use because I don't know enough about them, but any sort of, I would more than likely have my twig stove on me. Now I'll put my Trangia, my alcohol stove, in the twig stove because it holds it really well. So I usually have my twig stove, and I think I would honestly just find whatever I could, you know, sticks, twigs, anything that was maybe finger thick. Now I say finger thick because I've noticed whenever I burn that kind of fuel, it burns a lot longer than the thinner twigs and sticks and stuff, and usually a lot hotter because you can get more coals out of it as well. And I think anything that starts to get, you know, 2 or 3 times the thickness of that, it gets a bit clunky for the twig stove. So I think probably that, because that's a reliable source, but it's also, it doesn't take a lot of effort to get that fuel, depending on the fire starter that you've got, because if you've got Vaseline cotton balls, they'll light up twigs really well. But if you're relying solely on twigs and wood to get your fire started, then that's a different story. In an ideal situation though, we don't burn deadwood and we follow the Scottish Outdoor Access Codes. But so yeah, that would be my go-to. Next question. The next one says, what are your most useful outdoor plants to find and use while out there in the wild? Now, I haven't done a lot of foraging, so this answer's based purely off of like my knowledge, and I do want to do a lot more foraging. I'll get into that, but I think just based off of my own experience, willow is a really useful kind of tree and something that you can use while you're out, but it's not something that I've really got on my to-do list when I go out camping. It's more something that it's a really flexible sort of material that you can use to make baskets and that sort of stuff, and you can even make shelters out of it if you use the actual trees, but the likelihood of that happening is slim to none, I think. You've stirred up something in me though to get my foraging game going and start learning a bit more. Next question. Right, what is the most beautiful or elegant flower that you've found during your adventures? This is a difficult one. I've found that because I'm so focused on actually getting the experience in, because I'm so fresh to doing it, I'm not so focused on the flowers that I'm seeing or like the berries that I'm seeing, although I do want to be able to identify them and know what they're useful for and whether or not they're edible. Now, I've not seen them while I'm out or while I've been out, but I really love tulips and wild tulips. I think they're just stunning, especially wild tulips because they're huge. They've got really, really big heads on them. Other than that, I just really love moss. Moss is like, I don't know, there's like something about it, I think because it's so like spongy, and it's almost the way that it just blankets over still rocks or rotten wood, and it's I don't know, it's nice to look at, and I think it's just something that's interesting because I don't know a lot about moss. I know it is a really fascinating thing, you know. That's where I'm at now, but you know, ask me in a year's time or in my next Q&A and I'll probably have a very different answer. You've awoken something in me to keep an eye out for more flowers and learn to identify them though. So next question. So in this big comment, the question is the second line down at the bottom, and it says, how old were you when you first started your camping journey? So I was 18 and my first trip was, ironically enough, with my missus at the exact same spot at Loch Ard. That whole story, I could talk about that for days. It was a bit of a nightmare. I'll summarise it. It was way too hot, we didn't drink enough water, Lauren got heat stroke, our tent was I think 4 kilo. That was meant for car camping. And then the stove that we had was also meant for car camping. It was in like a big black handled case. And the exact same hike to the exact same spot took us no more than, or no less than 6 hours. Now to put it into perspective, that took me 3 hours to walk alone. It took us 6 hours to walk together. It was just a really poorly planned trip, but we got out in the end, and we were okay after a day or two's rest, but it was just really poorly planned. On the other hand, I done my very first solo wild camp, ironically enough, at Earl's seat. I actually made a video on my first solo camp that's on my channel. Again, I'll link it in the description, but that trip went relatively well, other than the fact that I didn't check the rating on my sleeping bag or sleeping mat, which is even more important. The tent I also had was the 4 kilogram tent. I think if you know basic like camping and planning and stuff, you know you should check your temperature ratings on your sleeping mat and your sleeping bag. And if you don't and you're going to a cold environment, particularly if you're 500 metres above sea level, it does matter. I can just remember that night, I froze. I woke up like teeth chattering, like curled up in a ball in this Tesco sleeping bag that didn't even have a temperature rating on it. That was the biggest poor decision I made, and that actually leads me into the next question, which is from the Uranium Hunter. What's the biggest mistake a beginner can make when wild camping for the first time? I have 2 answers. The main one would be not carrying enough water. Now that's fairly obvious why that would be the biggest mistake. If you don't have enough water, you will not function properly and it will impair your judgment, and dehydration is not good, let alone when you get heat stroke. That can make things dangerous. But assuming that you've got enough water and you're not that silly, I would then say what I did, not checking the temperature ratings on your kit, particularly in colder weather. That can, in the best situation, leave you with a bad night's sleep. In the worst situation, that could be deadly. So yeah, I hope that answers that. Next question. It's also from the Uranium Hunter, which also asks, can also ask about permissions in Scotland, i.e. can you really just camp anywhere, or do you get angry farmers? The Scottish Outdoor Access Codes permit you to camp anywhere within reason. It works under the assumption that you'll use common sense to decide where you're going to camp, other than, you know, you're permitted to go anywhere other than residential areas and I think commercial areas. So most places, about 90% of the land in Scotland, you can camp in. I'm not sure you're allowed to camp in fields that have crops in them, but livestock would be a horrible idea. Particularly, I'm more saying if it's like cows, because I think cows can be one of the deadliest animals. Ironically enough, you know, it's not bears or anything like that, it's cows. I think the last thing you want is to wake up, poke your head out of your tent and you've got a bull charging you, you know. So in theory you can camp pretty much anywhere. I don't know so much about the angry farmers, but great one. Next question. There's quite a few here from my missus. So she put, I've got a few questions. First one, how do you store all your camping gear? Any advice on how to organise it effectively? Great question. If you go to the cupboard down the hall, you can work it out yourself. No, in all seriousness, my kit's, it's arranged in a way that each section kind of relates to what's around it. So I've got my cooking gear beside my stove, and then beside the stove I've got fuel, and in front of that I've got fuel bottles to put them in. I've also got like my windbreak and my fire starters, and then it goes over to the med kit, the kind of bug wipes, bug sprays, and then it circles back round to just some other bits and bobs, like repair kits for sleeping mats and some maps, and then my axe sharpening puck. And beside the cooking kit, I should obviously mention that I've got my water filters. So I've got my gravity filter that I just got fairly recently and my Life Straw. And then in the bins beneath that stuff, I've got in the left grey box just a bunch of stuff that I don't really touch that often. So I've got a spare sleeping bag. Ironically enough, it's the one from Tesco that I froze in on Earl's seat. Some other waterproof bags, some scarves, you know, random bits and bobs in there. And then on top of that, I've got my foam sleeping mat, tent poles, tent pegs, and the right hand side I've got my bike pannier bag, the clear box that has another sleeping mat in it. So I've got that one rolled up, and it's not ideal for you to keep them rolled up because it can mess up the insulation in them and it can ruin their insulation properties essentially. That sleeping mat though I don't really use as much, if at all. But in the same box I've got my bivvy bag that I just got only about a week ago. I cannot wait to use that. And then I've got my tent as well, fits quite snugly in there. And then on top I store my sleeping bag really loosely in just a grey box. I'm hoping to actually get like a hanging system for it so I can keep it hung on the back of the door in that cupboard, and that goes for the same with my big kind of grey sleeping mat. I've not got a permanent place for that, but I'm trying to work out a system for that. And then up on the kind of clothes hanging rack I've got just random bits and bobs. I've got my fanny pack, I've got my waterproof bike bag that goes on the handlebars, some other waterproof dry sacks, and then some like paracords and ferro rod, flint and steel thing. But yeah, not much else that's kind of important in there. So I hope that answers that question. Next question, what has been your favourite trip? For safe sake, the trips with you and no others. That is a really good question. I can't say I have one. I would say I have 3 favourites based on pleasure, growth and sentiment. The one that I feel was the most kind of gave me the most gratification and pleasure was the first one that I did, the first solo wild camp in Earl's seat. Again, the video will be in the description. I just, there's many things that I appreciate now more than I did in the moment at that wild camp, particularly just the views. It was such a clear night and I could see all of the beginning of the Highlands and Loch Lomond and the sunset. It was absolutely gorgeous that night. And then the very next morning I got a cloud inversion at only 500 metres above sea level, which I think is crazy. So that was the one that I feel was my favourite in terms of pleasure. In terms of growth, I would say the 30 mile bike pack I done, because I learnt so much about perseverance and what my body can actually go through, and it just taught me a lot about the capabilities of, if I push myself hard and far enough, I can get places that are difficult. That was grueling, that trip. The exhaustion and the wind and the rain, and I couldn't see further than 20 metres ahead of me, 30 metres ahead of me, and I still did it and I still got through it. And then my favourite trip in terms of sentiment would definitely be the bike pack that I did with my missus. You know, that was just fun. I could remember going down the hills on the bikes and stuff, and it was just like we were getting to do that together, and that felt like a nice gift. I hope that answers that. And the next one, second last question, why have you started this YouTube channel? I think the main 2 reasons are I love being outdoors, and I'm not suited for a conventional job. I think I'm suited for doing this kind of thing and photography and being a creative more than someone who works a regular real world job, you know, like that conventional way of things. And I'm not ashamed to say that. It's how I feel and it's what I've experienced, and I just find it so gratifying and enjoyable to go out, even though it's difficult and even though it's a lot sometimes, and I'm not always in the 100% mindset to do it. I'm not in that mind space all the time when I go out, but that's, I think, the best part of it is you still go out and you still do it and you still experience it, and I just feel really gifted to be able to do that, you know. And just making these videos, it's fun. I enjoy content creation and doing all that sort of stuff and having a little community. Yeah, there's a variety of reasons that I started this channel, but I definitely want to make a living off of doing this. And yeah, if you've got any more questions or you've got any thoughts, stick them in the comments down below. But if you've got any thoughts or any questions, just pop them down in the comments and let me know. But other than that, thanks for watching the video, folks. Thank you again for 3,000 subscribers, and I'm Wild Camping Adam, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.